Welcome to Unapologetically Woman. In today's episode, we have Alex, an international board-certified lactation consultant, who talks to us today about postpartum bleeding and how it is very much different from period bleeding and the influence of breastfeeding on the return of periods. Don't miss this opportunity to gain insights into these crucial topics that affect women's health and well-being. Stay tuned. Welcome to Unapologetically Woman, the podcast where women come together to share their unfiltered experiences navigating womanhood. Join us as we dive into candid conversations about periods, perimenopause, postpartum bleeding, miscarriages, and more. This is a safe space where we embrace the raw, real, and often unspoken aspects of being a woman. Get ready to be empowered, inspired, and heard. This is Unapologetically Woman. Welcome to Unapologetically Woman. Alex is here, who is an international board-certified lactation consultant and mother of two. She is the founder of Motherhood Blooms Lactation, a private practice dedicated to helping mothers feel seen, heard, and validated while helping them reach their breastfeeding goals. She provides care with a non-judgmental, evidence-based, and holistic approach. With the birth of her first child and her own challenges breastfeeding for the first time, she found her passion for lactation support and education. She is dedicated to ensuring you feel well-supported, confident in how you feed your baby. Oh my gosh, you are a goddess. How amazing is that? Thank you so much, Alex, for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, I'm reading your bio and everything about you. And I'm like, this is so uniquely her. It's just something that you don't hear. And I'm really honored to have you on the show. And one of the things, that you mentioned was your expertise in delayed period when it comes to breastfeeding. And I really would like to get into that. But first, before we go into that, I would like to talk about the bleeding that happens after the pregnancy. We're going to talk about postpartum bleeding and what it is, what women should expect, and how it's different from a period.
Yes, it is so very different from a period. Now, every single person who has a baby is going to bleed after birth. So even if that baby's born vaginally or if that baby's born via a cesarean birth, you're going to bleed after birth because the blood's coming from the placenta. So we give birth to baby and then we give birth to the placenta. And the placenta is about the size of a dinner plate. We've got an 8 to 10 inch wound in our uterus that needs time to close. So you can imagine already how different it is from a typical period bleed. And we need an average of 4 to 6 weeks for this wound to actually close up and heal and for that bleeding to stop. So that's one of the biggest differences is that your postpartum bleed, it's called lochia, is going to last an average of 4 to 6 weeks. So that's already very different than a typical monthly period. The other thing that's going to be different is how it progresses. So initially, right after birth, it's going to be heavy. It's going to be a really heavy flow, but this isn't something where you can use just a heavy flow pad for. We need something that's labeled for maternity use, something that's for postpartum, because it's going to be heavy. There's also going to be large clots. And these are things that are actually normal. It's normal to have clots in this blood, and for a lot of people it's really alarming. Like when I say clot, I mean anything smaller than a clementine is still considered okay and normal, and that's wild for people to find out. Like even when I teach this stuff, people's jaws drop because they're like, wait, what? So definitely, I mean, if there's ever concerns, you always want to bring this up to your primary care provider, but it's really normal to have this heavy bleed with clots in the first few days right after. And then what we see is the blood, it starts to change. So it does start off like really deep red. It is really heavy. And then as your bleed continues, it starts to lighten up. The color starts to shift. We're kind of moving from that red range to more of like a pink color, gets a lot lighter. And then anywhere between that 4 to 6 week timeline is where you will then end up with the bleed will stop. It will sort of transition to more of like a white, creamy discharge, and then it will be gone. but it is the fact that the length is so different and that we have this heavy bleeding with clots. And we're not, the other thing I'll add there is we're not putting anything inside. Even if we had a cesarean birth, we're not using menstrual cups, we're not using tampons. Like, you've got to use the postpartum pads or a diaper. And that's what's happening in those first 2 weeks right after birth.
Whoa, like this is all like, this is so crazy, because this is things that you do not hear about when it comes to the birthing process. I feel like it stops right after they let us know, hey, this child is going to pop out of your vagina. It's going to hurt like hell. Like, I feel like it stops right there. There is no information out there. Well, it is out there, but it's not prominently known that, dude, this is going to happen to you after a baby. Like, that's a big, excuse my language, fucking deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's why, like, someone like you and your show is so important, because us as women, we literally are not given this information about our bodies. Like, there is so much that surprises a woman after childbirth that it really shouldn't. Like, we should have this information ahead of time.
Definitely, because like, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I'm like, I would be terrified if I'm constantly bleeding like that. And because I'm automatically going to be like, oh, it's my period. Oh my gosh, why am I bleeding this way? Like, that is such a scary thought. And we really have to know more information about this. And you having a child of your own and experiencing this on your own. Now, I would love to know your experience when it comes to the postpartum bleeding. And when I say your experience, I mean the whole shebang, like your environment at the time, your mentality at the time, and how you coped with it.
Yeah, I've got 2 kids. So obviously with my second, I had been through it once before, but when I had my first, I'm thinking back, and I think I had the understanding that there was going to be bleeding after birth. I wasn't a lactation consultant then, wasn't, an educator of any kind, but I did learn ahead to kind of prepare my body what to expect. And so I knew that I was giving birth to the placenta after my baby, and there was going to be this large wound. But I didn't really know what that meant until I experienced it. And it's the heaviest bleed I've ever had in my life. But it was only heavy for the first few days, because then after that, it already started to lighten. It's just that it lasted a long time. So for me, what I found most helpful is I was a huge fan of the postpartum diapers, like the Depends that you go buy at the store. And I would use a maternity pad, but then I would put it in a diaper instead of my underwear, and I would wear that just in case. It was like, just as a caution, just in case there's this heavy bleed. I've never experienced this before. Maybe there's an overflow. And within a couple of days, like, things had progressively lightened up. And then I was just using the postpartum pads and wearing regular underwear. I think I had pretty like a steady bleed for probably a week before I started to notice the color start to change. So then when, the red started to shift and things got light. For me personally, with my firstborn, it was about 4 weeks. So that whole process with the color change and the bleed lightening and then it ending up just as like a white discharge was about 4 weeks for me. And then that's why we have this average, because every person is so different. But then there was like, I had clots. I remember passing clots and was kind of like, ooh, I was a little concerned, and I talked to my midwives and they reassured me, like, they said, like, how big were these clots? I was like, oh, like probably the size of a dime. And I was like, and she's like, oh my goodness, no. She's like, if we're looking at like the size of a golf ball, and my eyes were like, what did you just say? And she's like, oh yeah, like she had no concerns. I didn't have any red flags. Like there was no odor. There was no like off colors, like things like green, like everything was totally normal. But I remember having a midwife. So this was in the very early days. She had come to my home. There's a couple home visits before I go see them. And I remember sitting on the couch and I brought that up, that I was like, I'm seeing blood clots. Like, do we need to panic? I was like, nope, that's totally normal. And I was like, wow, okay. So I remember that was something that I didn't know. There wasn't really any cramping or anything like that. So people who, when you menstruate, if you're someone who experiences cramps, because it's a bit different, There wasn't a lot of cramping. However, with my second child, there's something called after pains that happens. And when that uterus is contracting down, you're feeling almost the intensity of labor contractions again for usually the first like 1 to 3 days. And I definitely experienced that with my second and was just like, holy cow. And it was like, they're way more intense than a period cramp. And they actually intensify when you're nursing because it has to do with the hormones that are released. And I did not have this with my firstborn. And when I had my second and he was nursing, I was like, okay, this is what I teach other people about. Like, ooh. And I mean, anything that you would use for period cramps, you can use like a heat pad or, you know, an ibuprofen or something like that. You can absolutely do. But that was something that was very new to me with my second born, something that I knew about, but I was like, it probably won't happen to me, but it definitely did.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's so great. Like, I am just, okay, so I guess like, because I was thinking like, oh my gosh, it's going to be like painful for like 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm glad that you clarified that it's not like always like that, but you could have those, like, I didn't even know that the after pains is like a contraction all over again. You're like, what is that? Oh, well, I guess that makes sense because like you said, the placenta. You're getting rid of, oh, so that makes sense for the body doing what is, wait, actually, no. Does that make sense? Because if you feel it sometimes, but you don't feel like I'm confused. I confused
Okay.
myself.
So after baby's born, the placenta, which is the organ that keeps, you know, baby, you know, the nutrients cross the placenta during the pregnancy. It's after your baby's born, the placenta is born. So it detaches from the uterine wall. So that has to heal. But also your uterus just expanded like 500 times its size. So it is contracting down. Like immediately after birth, it starts contracting down. And so you are bleeding as your body's like closing down the wound left behind. You're basically healing, like where the placenta was attached. Your body has to heal that now. But at the same time, the uterus is getting smaller. And because it's contracting down, you can experience some cramping in that first 1 to 3 days. Generally, it's worse with a second baby and a third and so on. It's not many first-time moms experience that, but it's definitely something that can happen. But it's not, you're not feeling this for like 4 weeks every day. No, it's very much something that's easy to go through, but not postpartum is not easy. But I mean the period, the bleeding itself, it shouldn't be painful and crampy and uncomfortable for like 4 weeks.
And you know what else is like bugging me a bit? Like, it's like bugging me right now because, you know, it's a wound, you know, like it's like, you know, imagine you guys and like a sore on your body, okay, that you can see and it's open and that's inside your uterus. And that is what's happening in my mind right now. And I am like, oh my gosh. Like, and then I think about women who try to go back to work and I'm like, yo, bro, now, like, no way, no flipping way. Like, no, like I'm just like, now I'm in activist mode. No, that's crazy to me. That's insane. Like there is a wound literally inside your uterus that is healing during this time. And I never associate this when thinking about postpartum bleeding. Like that's crazy. Like, oh my gosh. And there was something that you mentioned about breastfeeding. And earlier you were talking about how breastfeeding impacts how quickly your period returns. And I would like to, first we're going to take a quick commercial break and then we're going to come back and Alex is actually going to explain to us, okay, how breastfeeding impacts when your period returns. So stay tuned. Welcome to Unapologetically Woman, the podcast where we dive into all things related to women's health, empowerment, and success. I'm Miss Tanya, a dedicated life coach using menstrual cycle synergy to help women executives, women entrepreneurs, and corporations, helping them establish better policies to accommodate women. If you are enjoying today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Share this video with a woman who would benefit from our discussions. We're always looking to grow our community and empower more women. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below sharing the insights you gained from today's episode. And don't forget to like this video to show your support. Want to be a guest on our show and share your story? Visit our website or find the link in the description to express your interests. Thank you for being part of our community. Subscribe now, click the notification bell, leave a comment, like, share, and join us on this empowering journey. If you're ready to take the next step towards your own empowerment, book a free 15 life coaching session with me. Visit www.mstanya.com to schedule your session today. For corporations looking to support women's health, I offer consulting services to help implement better policies. Remember, this episode is part of our launch episode series. You can expect new episodes of Unapologetically Woman twice a week, every Wednesday and Thursday at 5 a.m. Whether you're starting your day or winding down after work, we're here to inspire you. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on Unapologetically Woman. Welcome back, you guys, to Unapologetically Woman. We are here with the lovely Alex, and we were talking a little bit during the break, about women returning too quickly, after pregnancy, dealing with the postpartum bleeding. And Alex had some wonderful things to say and share, and I absolutely want her to share this with you guys and to really take what she is saying to heart.
Just wanted to quickly sort of build on what you just said about women heading back to work and how this is absolutely insane. Like, if this was on the outside of our bodies, like, people would take notice and care a heck of a lot more than they do. Like, we have moms, like, especially in the US, heading back to work at like 6 weeks postpartum or sooner. Meanwhile, we have people who breed animals and dogs, and those dogs can't even be separated from their moms till they're 8 weeks old. But we're like, oh no, people just go back to work. Like, we don't, like, we have a broken system. Like, everywhere we don't have proper like maternity care. That's a whole different topic. But yeah, I just wanted to add that, like, if, like you just said, if we could physically see this, people would care a lot more. Meaning people who are the policymakers in our governments would care a lot more. Like, that's a big deal. We just have as society that doesn't care enough, like, if what you were saying with like that, the wound from the placenta being born, like, if that was on the outside of our bodies, people would take notice. They would care. Like, so much more energy and efforts would be put into trying to have paid leave for families so that we're not heading back to work while we're literally still bleeding after giving birth to a human being.
Yes. And that is the thing, and also, women also need to take more charge of that as well when it comes to demanding certain things from our employers, because this is our health, and medically, this is a part of us being healthy. So it's really, it can get like legal, now that I'm even thinking about it. It's because like, I literally have a sore inside my body, and it's healing because I just delivered. Like, women also, have to start taking stands and be like, no, I'm not returning until such and such time. Like, this is what's going to happen. Like, you want to send me things here? Okay, fine. This is what I can handle during this. Like, we really have to get to that point, but it's scary, for a woman to think about trying to voice what she's going through, because also she's comparing herself. I feel like women do that a lot. They compare themselves to their male counterpart and how they're working and how they're being productive. And it's like, they're on a 24-hour hormonal clock. We are definitely not. Okay. Like, our energy levels can switch so quickly. And it's like, we have to honor and respect that and stop comparing. Like, it's like, we could be just so much more productive when we honor what's happening in any phase, any season of our bodies as women. Just honor it. Dude, if it's winter outside, put on a coat. Don't put on shorts because you want to fight it, It's not going to help you. Like, and it's the same thing with our bodies. It's like, okay, I'm going to honor that I just gave birth to this beautiful soul that is now in my arms. I'm going to connect. We are going to love each other during this. This is a beautiful ritual here. Like, and you spend that time while you're healing with your baby. And speaking of that, the breastfeeding aspect, right? Like this is like you have to go into breastfeeding. And I would love for you to talk about how the breastfeeding impacts how quickly your period returns, because we know, okay, 4 to 6 weeks, you're going through the postpartum bleeding. What is your period delayed during that entire time? Like what's actually happening, and how does breastfeeding impact the return of a woman's menstruation?
Yeah. So anything before 8 weeks postpartum, like most practitioners would call that lochia. So anything before 8 weeks we'd classify as like postpartum bleeding. Again, for most people, it's that 4 to 6 week mark. But then basically what's happening is that the hormones that are needed for your body to produce milk and lactate are actually in direct competition with the hormones needed for ovulation. So generally what happens then is that because your body's prioritizing lactation and milk supply for baby, hormone or ovulation is sort of on the back burner. So there is an average. Now, this is where every one of us is so different. There is such I even have a different experience between both children I'll share, but it's an average of about 9 months that you don't have a period for. Now, this depends on a lot of factors. It primarily, you need to be exclusively breastfeeding. So what that means is it's just your milk, but also as soon as like bottles are introduced, like if you're pumping milk, as soon as you bring in pacifiers, all of these can actually affect how quickly your period will return. If you're not nursing at nighttime, that can also impact things. So when we talk about breastfeeding delaying ovulation and therefore like the return to fertility and your cycle, it's exclusive breastfeeding. So this means baby's only nursing. Baby is nursing on demand. So basically whenever they cue that they're hungry, they're feeding. So that means in the nighttime, that means during the day. Basically, your baby would be under 6 months old. And if all of those criteria are met, then there's something that we call lactation amenorrhea method, which is some people will use it as a form of birth control. Because when all of those are met, there's an average of about 98% chance that it's an effective form of birth control. Now, that is another topic in and of itself. And it's not going to work for everyone. It definitely doesn't, because in our modern day world, you know, if a baby's using a pacifier or you're pumping at nighttime, that's automatically going to impact things. So I'm here more so to talk about how it impacts it, whether or not you want to use it, you know, that's up to each person individually. But basically, an average of 9 months. And with my firstborn, we actually had a lot of challenges breastfeeding, and that's why I'm a board certified lactation consultant today. And so he was supplemented with formula for a few weeks. I was pumping. We didn't use pacifiers because he wasn't a big fan, but technically I did things that should have interfered and brought my period back sooner. But I finished the postpartum bleed, and then I didn't get my period with my firstborn until I was 10 months postpartum. Because while we had a rocky start, I did move to exclusively breastfeeding him. That was what I wanted. That was my goal. And I was able to, you know, stop supplementing and everything. And he was then therefore just nursing whenever he needed to. And it was 10 months before my period came back. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that you can ovulate before that first period comes. And so if you're not tracking these things, if you're not, you know, in tune with your body, if you don't know what to look for when it comes time that your body is ovulating, people can miss that. And then, you know, some people have surprise pregnancies, or they're just, you know, they're like suddenly their period shows up. And so for me, I remember, I don't think that I ovulated, or at least I didn't really pay attention and notice the signs. But I know at 10 months, I was just like, oh, I just got my period. Like there wasn't a lot of warning. It just sort of like, okay. And now from then on, I was menstruating, even though I was still breastfeeding my son. I know people who at 2 months postpartum, their cycles have come back. I know people who did exclusively breastfeed and everything I said, and it's always, on demand. There's no pacifiers, there's no pumping. And at 3 months, their period came back. There's other factors like, insulin plays a role in, people's blood sugar. But generally speaking, because the body's prioritizing making milk, ovulation and return to fertility is on the back burner for a little while.
Wow, and that makes so sense. Wow, like our bodies, like as women, are just so amazing. We are such beautiful beings. Like that is just, wow, that is just amazing to just think about like that process. Like the body is just like, hey, it's about the baby right now. Okay, another one can wait. This one's here, It's like, let's do this, like, and that's just so amazing to me, like to understand and know that process because I'm one without children, so it's like I don't know anything about this process. Like in my mind is like you guys go through a lot of pain, that's it. Like that's what I'm thinking. But that is insane to me, like how beautiful the body just regulates itself like that. And I know that you were saying its impact is different for every woman. I mean, and that's also good to understand as well. To understand, hey, whatever's happening, it's about you. Like it is literally about you. Like don't compare yourself like too much, to like that average, but like you said, go check in with your doctor, make sure everything is okay, stay on top of it, make sure they don't give you the brush off because they know that you're going through postpartum bleeding, like make sure they're like, oh no, it's like, no, I'm gonna need you to understand, like, like don't allow them to give you the brush off. Like I definitely want to make sure I mention that because too many times, like it's expected that we should internalize the pain and the suffering that we do go through, even when you think about with our period, it's like, oh, it's normal, push through it, and it's like, yeah, it is normal, but I should be resting. There's a difference. My body is saying something different from what you're saying. And to honor that. And that's crazy that this is what led you into becoming a lactation specialist is because of your experience with your first child. Now, you said with your second child, it was different.
Yeah. So with us, like just speaking about return to periods, with my second child, I was 15 months postpartum. So it was actually a longer period of time. And I didn't have a period for over 1 year. And so it was very so I went 41 weeks pregnant with him. So no period, 41 weeks pregnant, no period. Then I had the 4 weeks of lochia. And then I went 15 months with no period because I was exclusively breastfeeding him. He nursed during the nighttime longer than his brother did. And so those things all play a role. But yeah, I remember when 10 months came and I was like, okay, is my period going to show up? What's going to go on? And there was nothing. And with him at 15 months, though, the day before my period came, I had a wave of hormones. We'll call it that. Like I was like out of sorts. I was angry 1 minute, I was crying the next. I was like, what is going on? I thought it was just a hard day of being a mom. And then I went to the bathroom and was like, oh, well, there she is. Like, and arrived at 15 months postpartum. And so one thing that I do want to add is when that first period comes back postpartum, it can be a lot different than what your periods were like before. And that what I mean is before pregnancy. So it's not going to be like the lochia we talked about, but it might be heavier than what you're typically used to. The length of it might differ. And so these are all things to, watch out for because you know what's normal for your body. And if you have concerns, always bring them up with your primary care provider. And I know for me, the first few periods were initially heavier than what I was basically used to as someone who, before I had kids. And then things shifted and I found out what was, normal for my body. But that was a big difference between baby 1 and 2 was with my second. I just had this like wild day, which I know a lot of people can relate to, even when it's just your period, right? Sort of those PMS symptoms and like you know it's coming. What's happening? Oh, okay, here's my cycle's back now. So
I'm so glad you explained that, because I was going to ask you, like, did you have any symptoms before it came? And I feel like that makes sense for it to be like really intense. I mean, it's delayed for over a year, and I probably would have freaked out and thought I went straight into menopause or something, like, dude, like, yo, did I just miss something? Like, I would have like freaked like over a year, like, but that's also good information to know, and to also know, hey, stay track of it every single month still, recognize, hey, I'm feeling a little different here, and be able to recognize when it might possibly start, because it's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for everyone. That's why tracking your period now, tracking postpartum is important, like including like your cravings, you guys, your energy levels, your mood, like understanding, because you're going to have to, like you said, your period is going to be different now. So now it's like you have to understand how to, okay, she's flowing a different way. All right. Okay, you're going left this time. All right, I'm going to go left with you, and just going with that part of your season and that change. So that's really beautiful to know and understand. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Like, I feel so like I'm getting goosebumps, you guys, like goosebumps. And I'm so honored to have you here on the show. And before we, go into a closing, is there anything that you would like to share with the audience? Is there anything that you would like to promote? How can we support you?
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Motherhood Blooms Lactation. You can also, if you head to my website, motherhoodbloomslactation.com/resources, all the things are on there. So any of the like free guides that I have, you can access like courses, there's different ways to work with me. Like I see clients one-on-one. I've got a group program. So connecting with me on Instagram, or head over to my website.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This is so empowering. Alex, you are so empowering. Like, I am really so honored. You guys, like, if you have to listen to this episode over again, if you're on iTunes, okay, if you are watching this on YouTube, rewatch this again, okay, because this information is so important for anyone who is thinking about having a baby, period. Like, you should know what's going to happen after the baby, because, we go straight into just taking care of the child, but you have to take care of yourself. I feel like oftentimes mothers lose that aspect, and having people like Alex really show mothers like, no, like, you are worthy to take care of yourself as well as your baby, is a beautiful and inspiring energy that she is just putting out into the world. And I am honored, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, you guys, we're going to go into our closing real quick, so stay tuned. Thanks for joining us today. Learn more about our guests in the description below. Download your free period tracker to stay in tune with your energy levels, mood, cravings, and your flow. Interested in being a guest on our show? Complete the form in the description. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts on today's episode and be entered into our surprise monthly giveaway. For women looking for a natural way to relieve menstrual cramps, try live resin gummies to ease menstrual cramps. The link is available in the description. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more empowering content. This is Unapologetically Woman.